Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got modern archaeological surveys, complex geological records, and some surviving ancient letters from a Roman administrator named Pliny the Younger.
Right.
And we're using these texts to explore this really profound paradox.
Yeah.
Like how the complete and devastating destruction of a single community somehow became, well, the greatest act of historical preservation the world has ever seen.
Yeah, it really is a paradox.
It is. But to do this right, I want to invite you to just, step away from the noise, the bright screens, the rushing pace of our modern world. Just take a slow, deep breath. Let the stress of today fade, because we are traveling back in time almost 2,000 years. And we aren't going to look at, grand military strategies or the marble halls of an emperor's palace. Our mission for this deep dive is to quietly observe an ordinary city. We're simply going to walk its streets, listen to its echoes, and gently explore the everyday lives of the people who live there just before their world disappeared into the earth.
Yeah, we're journeying to a region called Campania, which is in southern Italy, just resting peacefully near the brilliant blue waters of the Bay of Naples. And the story we're exploring from these sources tonight, it's not, a dry academic record.
No, not at all.
It is, at its heart, a story of life. It's about the quiet, mundane moments that make up a human day. It's the story of the city of Pompeii.
But, before we can truly understand the long, deep silence that eventually fell over Pompeii, we really have to first understand what it sounded like to walk through its lively, sunlit streets.
Oh, absolutely. And they were incredibly vibrant streets. By the 1st century A.D., Pompeii was this bustling, prosperous Roman municipality. I mean, it had existed for centuries, right? It was shaped by the Oscans, the Greeks, the Samnites, before finally becoming this vital, wealthy part of the Roman world. The volcanic land around it was wonderfully fertile.
Because of the mountain?
Exactly, because of Vesuvius. It was yielding multiple harvests a year, and the coastal location made it this perfect hub for Mediterranean trade. So thousands of people called the city home.
Right.
There were wealthy families living in spacious, sprawling estates, and hardworking merchants running import businesses. You had highly skilled craftsmen and, well, as in all Roman cities, a massive population of enslaved people who really kept the city functioning. It was a completely layered society.
I want you to imagine stepping into that city on a clear, ordinary morning. The warmth of the Mediterranean sun is just starting to heat the heavy caving stones.
Yeah.
And in the distance, you can hear the soft murmur of voices echoing off the plaster walls.
Mm-hmm.
The rich, comforting smell of bread baking in massive wood-fired ovens is just drifting through the air. You can see merchants slowly sliding back the wooden shutters of their food shops.
The Thermopolia.
The Thermopolia, right. And they're arranging their terracotta jars of wine and lentils and salted fish for the day. Children are weaving their way through the narrow, shadowed streets. I mean, it is a city fully awake.
It really is.
There are grand public baths with these sophisticated subterranean heating systems.
Yeah.
Large outdoor theaters where musicians are maybe tuning their instruments. A massive amphitheater for the games. And incredibly beautiful homes. And these homes aren't just shelters. They are, quiet sanctuaries.
Right.
Built around interior gardens filled with the gentle sound of trickling water from fountains. And featuring walls painted in brilliant deep reds, bright yellows, and soft oceanic blues.
It was a deeply immersive environment. And what makes Pompeii so incredibly special to the archaeological record now is the profound amount of everyday detail it left behind. We don't just see the grand architecture. We see the writing on the walls.
Yeah, the graffiti.
The plaster of Pompeii was covered in a chorus of voices. There were official political messages painted in bold red letters urging citizens to vote for a specific magistrate, or advertisements for upcoming games. But there were also the unfiltered, deeply human thoughts of ordinary people, just names casually scratched into the paint with a stylus.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because the idea of reading a 2,000-year-old message scratched into a wall, that's where the history stops feeling distant for me.
Yeah.
It's where you realize human nature hasn't really changed at all.
Exactly. I mean, when you translate the graffiti, you find these small, petty arguments, you find declarations of love, you find someone complaining about the service at a local tavern, writing something to the effect of, innkeeper, I feel for your lies. You sell us watered-down wine and drink the good stuff yourself.
That is so universally human.
It is. It's just fragments of an ordinary Tuesday. They're tallies of grain prices, children practicing their alphabets, and, inside jokes between friends that only they would ever understand.
Walking through ancient Pompeii, reading those walls, it's so much like walking through a lively modern neighborhood today. You know that feeling when you walk down a familiar street and you see the physical wear and tear of a community?
Mm-hmm.
You see the fading paint on a brick wall or the smooth stone steps worn down by thousands of shoes. In Pompeii, you can literally see the deep grooves carved into the heavy basalt street stones by the wooden wheels of carts over decades of use.
Right.
The Romans even standardized their axles so the carts could glide through these exact ruts. It wasn't a pristine museum piece. It was a living, breathing hometown.
It was a place where people argued over the price of a tunic, where families gathered in their kitchens at dusk, where life was simply happening in all its beautifully mundane ways.
But beneath this lively daily routine, beneath the warm sun and the smell of baking bread, there was a hidden instability, a quiet geological tension that the residents had felt, but completely misunderstood.
Right. That tension first made itself undeniably known in the year AD 62, which was roughly 17 years before the city was lost.
Wow, 17 years.
Yeah, a massive earthquake violently shook the entire region of Campania. Buildings cracked, grand temples were severely damaged, and family homes crumbled. But in the years that followed, the people of Pompeii did what communities always do after a disaster.
They rebuilt.
They rebuilt. Even on the day the city was finally lost in AD 79, Pompeii was still covered in scaffolding. They were actively repairing their beloved hometown. They were incredibly resilient. But there is a deeply tragic irony here in the historical record. The people knew that the earth beneath their feet could move. They understood earthquakes intimately. But they had absolutely no modern scientific understanding of volcanoes.
Well, wait, I actually want to push back on that a little bit, or at least ask for some clarification here.
Sure.
Because they lived right next to the Campi Flegrae, right? The Phlegraean Fields, which is a highly active volcanic area. They knew about sulfur vents and hot springs and ground that literally steamed. I mean, the Romans built bathhouses over geothermal vents. So are you saying they just never connected those obvious volcanic dots to Mount Vesuvius?
That's a great question, and it really speaks to the limitations of ancient natural philosophy. They understood that the earth contained subterranean fires. That's how they explained the hot springs of the Campi Flegrae. But Vesuvius didn't behave like the Phlegraean Fields.
Oh, yeah.
Vesuvius had been dormant for roughly 700 years. To the Romans, a mountain was just a mountain. It had no active vents, no steaming fissures, no smell of sulfur. When they looked at Vesuvius, they didn't see a stratovolcano. They saw a heavily forested, gentle slope.
Wow.
In fact, ancient frescoes recovered from the region show Vesuvius as a single rounded peak covered in lush vineyards right up to the summit. It was simply a generous piece of the landscape that gave them incredibly rich volcanic soil for their crops.
That is just deeply haunting. I mean, they had no satellite monitors, no seismographs detecting magma movement, no emergency alerts buzzing on a device. And more than that, they didn't have the collective memory of Vesuvius as a monster. To them, it was just a peaceful neighbor.
And that peaceful illusion makes the mystery of time surrounding the eruption all the more poignant. For centuries, based on surviving medieval copies of the letters written by Pliny the Younger, history confidently taught us that the mountain woke up on August 24th.
Right.
But as modern archaeologists softly brush away the layers of time, the Earth itself suggests a different, more autumnal story.
Here's where it gets really interesting, just from a historical detective perspective. We always accepted the August date because, well, it was written down.
Right.
But over centuries of monks copying Pliny's manuscripts by hand, it seems a clerical error occurred. The archaeological evidence tells a completely different story than the written one. Excavators have found the remains of heavy autumn clothing on the victims. They found braziers, essentially ancient space heaters, pulled out into the living rooms.
Yeah.
They found the presence of late-season fruits like pomegranates and chestnuts, and closed containers of new wine that would only be pressed and sealed in the fall.
Yes, and the most compelling piece of evidence was discovered quite recently. Archaeologists uncovered a faint charcoal inscription on a wall in a house that was undergoing renovations.
Oh, wow.
And the inscription contained a date corresponding to October 17th. Now, charcoal is incredibly fragile. It smudges and fades quickly. For that charcoal writing to have survived the burial of the city, it had to have been written mere days before the ash fell. It all quietly but firmly points to a crisp day in late October.
That is amazing.
This isn't some fierce academic debate meant to rewrite textbooks just for the sake of it. Rather, it's a gentle reminder of their humanity. They were simply preparing for an ordinary autumn.
They were harvesting grapes, unpacking warmer woolen cloaks for the changing weather, just, going about their day. And so on that ordinary autumn afternoon, while people were eating lunch with their families or working in their shops, the silent mountain finally woke up.
And it is crucial to understand that it did not happen with an immediate city-destroying blast that wiped everything away in an instant. The catastrophe had a gradual, deeply confusing start.
Okay.
The eruption began by sending a massive, towering column of volcanic gas, pumice, and ash incredibly high into the stratosphere. Pliny the Younger, who was watching from a naval base across the bay in Misenum, described the cloud as looking exactly like a giant Mediterranean pine tree.
A pine tree.
Yeah, a tall, straight trunk of dark, rising material spreading out into broad, flat branches at the very top.
Let's explain the mechanics behind that, because it's really fascinating. What Pliny was describing is now known in modern geology as the Plinian eruption. Deep inside the Earth, magma rapidly depressurizes. The gases dissolved inside the magma suddenly expand. There's a violent exsolution of volatiles.
Right.
This massive release of energy blasts pulverized rock and superheated gas upward at supersonic speeds. The sheer upward thrust of the heat and pressure acts like a pillar, holding millions of tons of rock 20 miles up in the sky.
Precisely. The column was pushed so high it hit the tropopause, where it lost its upward momentum and flattened out, creating that umbrella pine shape Pliny described. And as that massive cloud spread outward, it blotted out the sun over Pompeii.
Imagine the strange, ominous shadow that must have cast over those sunlit streets. And then, the physical sensation of the fallout begins. It wouldn't have been a sudden crushing weight of a landslide. It would have started as a sound. Tap, tap, tap on the terracotta roofs.
Yeah. Small, light, porous pieces of volcanic rock called pumice or lapilli began to fall like a strange, dry, gray rain.
Wow.
At first, you could just brush it off your shoulders. You could still walk through the streets, perhaps looking up in absolute confusion, holding a piece of cloth over your mouth. But the horrifying reality of this eruption was its slow, relentless, mechanical progression.
As the hours ticked by, the pumice falling from the sky became heavier and larger. It accumulated in the courtyards. It piled up in the narrow streets, centimeter by centimeter, hour by hour.
And this brings us to an incredibly specific, fatal flaw in their environment. The architecture of Pompeii, while beautiful, became a trap.
Right, because Roman roofs were not designed for this. Their roofs were typically built with a central opening called a compluvium, designed to catch rainwater and funnel it into a basin below. And the roofs themselves were relatively flat, pitched only enough to shed water.
Right.
They were not steeply angled to shed heavy loads of snow or rock. So as the pumice piled up on these flat tiles, the weight of the stone began to grow beyond what the wooden crossbeams could hold. This architectural design forced the residents into an impossible situation. The roofs began to groan under the sheer tonnage of the rock, and then slowly, one by one, they began to cave in.
To stay indoors meant risking being crushed by your own ceiling. To go outside meant stepping into a barrage of falling debris. And we really must remember the sensory shift that accompanied this. The bright daytime sky was slowly choked out by thick gray ash until the afternoon turned into an absolute suffocating darkness. You are trapped in your own sanctuary while the air grows hot, thick, and smells of sulfur.
I can't help but think about how terrifying that isolation would be. Think about your own home today, your living room. It's the place you feel most secure. And suddenly, it feels like an alien environment. And worse, imagine the sheer panic of seeing the sky go black and not being able to reach anyone.
Yeah.
Today, we'd immediately reach for our phones to text our family, to check the news, to see what the authorities are saying. But in Pompeii, not only is there no network, the concept of electricity won't exist for another 1,800 years. There were no electric lights to switch on, no street lights to guide the way, no sirens.
There was only the thick falling ash, the suffocating darkness, the sounds of roofs cracking, and the deep, low rumbling of the mountain echoing endlessly through the black air.
As that heavy darkness fell, every single person in Pompeii was faced with an agonizing, impossible choice: stay or run.
Because the eruption was gradual, it gave the people of Pompeii hours to decide what to do. And in that time, many people survived this first phase by making the difficult choice to flee. The city was not instantly frozen in time, the way pop culture sometimes portrays it. The archaeological record shows clear, heartbreaking evidence of this escape. When we excavate the ancient roads leading out of the city gates, we find the echoes of those who left. They were found with iron keys in their pockets, carrying small cloth pouches of silver coins, wearing their most valuable gold snake bracelets. They clearly understood that their world was in severe danger, and they tried to carry whatever financial security they could into the unknown.
The emotional weight of that journey is almost too much to hold. Just imagine packing a single bag in the absolute dark, lit only by a flickering oil lantern, holding a frightened child's hand, supporting an older relative as you stumble blindly through streets that are now filling with knee-deep, shifting pumice.
It's just devastating.
You are walking away from the only home you have ever known, stepping out into a hot, ash-filled sky with absolutely no idea where you will sleep that night, or if you will ever see your kitchen, your garden, or your neighbors again.
It is a profound human tragedy. But while many walked away into the dark, others remained behind. And this raises an important question, why did they stay? When we look at the bodies recovered inside the houses, the uncertainty surrounding their choices is deeply haunting.
Were they just waiting, hoping the strange rain of stones would eventually stop?
It is very likely. I mean, if you have no concept of a volcanic eruption, a heavy rain of stones might just seem like a bizarre temporary weather event. You might think, if I can just wait this out inside, the sun will eventually come back.
Right.
Or perhaps they were caring for someone who simply could not make the harsh physical journey through the deep pumice. An elderly parent, a sick child, a woman in labor. The pumice was light, but it was deep and exhausting to wade through.
Oh, absolutely.
Perhaps some stayed to protect their life's work, their homes, their shops from potential looters. We have to look at these decisions not with the judgment of modern hindsight, but with a deep respect for their humanity. They were not foolishly frozen in place. They were human beings making the absolute best choices they could in an unimaginable, terrifying situation, completely devoid of the scientific information we take for granted today.
For those who made the grueling, terrifying choice to walk away, the familiar shapes of their city slowly disappeared into the dark ash behind them. They survived, but they became refugees. But for those who stayed in the city, huddling in the dark corners of their homes, brushing the ash from their faces, the next morning brought the final devastating phase.
As the second day dawned, though there was absolute no sunlight to show it, the physical nature of the eruption shifted fatally. Remember that massive, towering column of gas and ash holding itself 20 miles up in the sky?
Right, the Plinian column being held up by heat and pressure.
Exactly. Eventually, the eruption began to lose its upward momentum. The vent of the volcano widened, or the pressure from the magma chamber dropped, and the column simply ran out of the thermal energy required to support millions of tons of rock in the stratosphere. Gravity took over. The column collapsed back down onto the mountain.
And this is where we have to talk about pyroclastic flows, because this is the mechanism of Pompeii's final destruction. I think the best analogy to explain a pyroclastic flow is to imagine taking a bottle of warm soda, shaking it violently, and then popping the top.
Yeah.
The sudden release of pressure causes the liquid and gas to aggressively expand, foam up, and rush violently down the sides of the bottle. Only in this case, the foam is superheated volcanic gas, ash, and pulverized rock.
That is exactly what happened. The collapsing column created pyroclastic flows and surges, these dense, ground-hugging clouds of volcanic material that moved rapidly down the slopes of Vesuvius like a boiling liquid avalanche. They moved at terrifying speeds, sometimes exceeding 100 miles per hour. And the heat was unimaginable. Estimates suggest temperatures inside the flow reached anywhere from 400 to 700 degrees Celsius. When these surges reached the walls of Pompeii, they swept through the city, overwhelming everything and everyone in their path in a matter of seconds.
It was absolute, thermal, and final.
Yes. The intense heat would have caused instant asphyxiation and thermal shock. The eruption continued in its various forms for roughly 2 days. When the trembling earth finally stilled and the skies very slowly began to clear, the Pompeii that had existed just 48 hours prior was completely gone.
Gone.
It was buried under several meters of dense volcanic ash, pumice, and debris. The very geography of the region had been violently altered. The nearby river Sarno was forced into a new channel. Even the coastline, where the sea had once met the bustling ports of the city, had been pushed back by over a mile of new land.
So what does this all mean for the people who were left behind, the survivors who made it out?
For the survivors who had fled, they eventually found refuge. Modern research shows they assimilated into nearby Roman communities like the town of Nola, or even resettled in Naples. The Emperor Titus sent aid. But Pompeii itself was never rebuilt.
It was just too buried.
Right, it was too deeply buried, the infrastructure too completely destroyed, the damage too profound. As the decades passed, the wind blew soil over the ash, and grass began to grow. As centuries passed, the Roman Empire itself crumbled, split, and fell. Pompeii slowly transitioned from a tragic, living memory into a forgotten myth, quietly resting beneath the earth.
I just want to pause and reflect on the absolute silence of that morning after the eruption ended. Think of the lively city we walked through at the beginning of our journey. The busy bakeries, the grand temples, the overlapping voices of thousands of people bargaining in the market, the dogs barking, the carts rattling over the stones.
Yeah.
All of it was replaced by a smooth, gray, unrecognizable landscape, a profound, heavy, absolute quiet.
The city slept deeply beneath the earth. Kings waged wars above it. New nations were formed. New languages were born. The world completely transformed over 1,000 years. And Pompeii waited in the dark until a new era inadvertently began to uncover its secrets.
It wasn't until the late 16th century, when an architect named Domenico Fontana was digging an underground canal, that pieces of painted walls were accidentally rediscovered. And it wasn't until the 18th century, starting around 1748 under the King of Naples, that serious excavations began. The city had become an accidental time capsule.
Though we must acknowledge the early days of discovery were, unfortunately, more akin to treasure hunting than science.
Oh, absolutely.
Explorers tunneled blindly into the dark ash, looking for marble statues, gold jewelry, and beautiful frescoes to hack off the walls and decorate the palaces of European nobility. But over time, the discipline of archaeology evolved. It slowly shifted from the mere collection of valuable objects to the careful, respectful preservation of a historical record. Archaeologists began to realize that the city itself, the structure of its streets, the arrangement of its kitchens, the placement of its tools, was the true treasure.
And the way the ash preserved the city is a delicate, almost poetic chemical process. It's as the reason we have the famous plaster casts of the victims. I really want to explain this because it's a brilliant piece of historical preservation.
It is.
In 1863, an Italian archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli was put in charge of the excavations. His team kept finding these strange human-shaped cavities in the compacted ash containing nothing but skeletons. Fiorelli realized that he could recover the exact shapes of the past if he carefully poured liquid plaster into these hollow spaces and let it harden before chipping away the surrounding ash.
What's fascinating here is the precise mechanics of why those hollow spaces existed in the first place. When the final volcanic surges settled over the city, the fine ash packed tightly around everything, every piece of furniture, every dog, every person.
Right.
And because volcanic eruptions are often accompanied by intense rainstorms caused by the atmospheric disturbance, the wet ash essentially acted like a quick-setting cement. Over the centuries, the compacted ash hardened into a solid shell, a rock called tuff. Meanwhile, inside that solid shell, the wood of the doors, the fabric of the clothes, and the tragic organic remains of the people themselves slowly decayed into the earth.
Leaving those spaces.
Right. This left perfect, hollow, negative impressions of exactly what had been there the moment the ash cooled.
By filling those voids with plaster, Fiorelli resurrected the final moments of a city.
Those plaster casts are famous, and when you see them in person, they literally take your breath away. But we have to remember they are so much more than archaeological artifacts. They are quiet, resting monuments to real people. People who had plans for a tomorrow that simply never came. They capture a mother holding a child, a man covering his face from the dust with his cloak, even a dog still attached to its chain. It is a profoundly moving, gentle reminder of the fragility of life. But the ash preserved the mundane too, which is just as powerful.
Yes, the mundane artifacts are what truly connect us to them. The ash preserved a round loaf of bread, perfectly carbonized black in an oven. It is known as a panis quadratus, a classic Roman loaf scored into 8 distinct segments so it could be broken apart easily.
Oh, wow.
You can even see the baker's stamp pressed into the top of the crust, a metal tag used to mark whose bread was whose in a communal oven.
It preserved brightly painted walls and dining rooms, the vivid red pigment still glowing as if painted yesterday. It preserved the smooth, colorful marble of a shop counter where we found the remains of lentils and fish bones in the recessed jars, meaning a merchant had served hot food just hours before the sky went dark.
These small, impossibly fragile artifacts allow us to hear the quiet voices of ordinary people. Without this accidental preservation, the baker with his stamp, the shopkeeper serving lentils, the person who scratched a joke about the innkeeper into the plaster, they would have vanished completely into the deep well of time.
Yeah.
History usually only remembers the emperors who build massive monuments or the generals who win bloody wars. History books are written about the elite, but Pompeii is entirely different. Pompeii remembers the person who forgot their bread in the oven.
Standing in the peaceful sunlit ruins of Pompeii today, with the green grass growing softly between the ancient basalt stones, you can look up and see that same mountain. Vesuvius is still there, green and quiet, and standing there leaves you with a profound realization about our own existence.
It makes you look at your own daily routine entirely differently, doesn't it?
If we synthesize what this all truly means, there is actually something strangely comforting about Pompeii. Yes, it was a tragedy, but the people who lived there were just living perfectly ordinary lives. They were completely unaware that they were stepping into the pages of history. They were just buying dinner, walking the dog, sweeping the floor, complaining about their neighbors. And that is what most of our lives are made of. Our lives are constructed from thousands of ordinary, quiet moments, a shared meal with a friend, a slow walk home from work, a quiet evening sitting by a window. We never truly know which moments matter in the grand scheme of time. We never know how our ordinary days might echo into the future.
As we draw this deep dive to a close, I'd like to guide you through one final, peaceful visualization. Let's leave the heavy ash, the scientific mechanics, and the ruins behind. Let's go back to Pompeii just as it was, before the disaster. Take a moment to imagine the sun slowly setting over the lush, green, fertile hills of Campania. The bright blue sky is fading into soft, rich shades of purple and gold. The heat of the Mediterranean day is lifting, replaced by a cool, gentle evening breeze drifting in from the bay.
Yeah.
The busy, noisy streets are finally quieting down. The heavy wooden shutters of the shops are being pulled shut for the night. You can hear the soft, rhythmic, calming sound of a fountain in a private courtyard. Inside the homes, small clay oil lamps are being lit, casting a warm, flickering amber glow against the beautifully painted walls. A family is sitting together around a table, sharing a meal of fresh bread and wine, laughing quietly about the day. It is a perfect, peaceful, ancient Roman evening, a city simply resting.
It is a beautiful image to hold on to, a city at peace, full of life.
As we prepare to leave this ancient world and return to our own, I want to leave you with a gentle, lingering thought. Look around the room you are in right now. Look at the surfaces, the tables, the everyday things that surround you. If the soft ash of time were to suddenly peacefully preserve your life right this very second, what ordinary, mundane object sitting on your table right now would tell the story of who you are to someone 2,000 years in the future? What small, everyday item holds the quiet truth of your life?
We bid a gentle goodnight to the baker, the merchant, and the families who lived their ordinary, beautiful days so long ago. Good night to the city beneath the earth.
Sleep well, and good night, Pompeii.